People always believe a wedding is where love begins. No one talks about the moment a man decides to destroy his own wedding because of what he sees behind a forgotten apartment door. The city belonged to Damian Blackwood long before the sun ever touched its glass towers. Every district, every shipping port, every luxury hotel that shimmered beneath the dawn carried whispers of his family's influence. Newspapers called him the brilliant CEO of Blackwood Holdings. Politicians called him an indispensable ally. In darker corners of the city, where loyalty was bought with blood instead of contracts, people lowered their voices and called him something else, the Mafia Alpha. At 31, Damian had mastered the art of becoming unreadable. His silver-gray eyes rarely betrayed emotion. His perfectly tailored charcoal suits hid shoulders built by years of discipline rather than vanity. His scent, a restrained blend of cedarwood and cold steel, carried the unmistakable authority of an alpha who had never once questioned his own decisions. In exactly 2 days, he was supposed to marry Victoria Ashcroft. The engagement had dominated business headlines for months. 2 influential families, 2 powerful empires, a flawless union that promised stability, expansion, and absolute control over industries stretching far beyond the city. Everyone congratulated him. Everyone assumed he was happy. Damian simply accepted their words with polite silence. Love had never been part of the arrangement. Marriage, in his world, was another contract waiting to be signed. His penthouse overlooked the sleeping skyline as morning light spilled across polished marble floors. Damian buttoned his cufflinks with practiced precision while reviewing the day's schedule on his tablet. Board meeting, security briefing, dinner with Victoria's parents, wedding rehearsal planning. His assistant had organized every appointment perfectly, or at least he always did. Damian reached the final page of the schedule and paused. One line was missing. Ethan Brooks. For 5 years, Ethan's name had appeared beside every meeting, every flight, every negotiation. The quiet Omega seemed to exist everywhere Damian needed him before anyone else even realized there was a problem. Coffee arrived before Damian noticed he wanted one. Contracts appeared already highlighted. Flights never ran late. Arguments dissolved before reaching his office. The young assistant never complained, never asked for recognition, never arrived late, never called in sick. Until today, Damian glanced toward his phone resting beside the tablet. No message, no explanation, only a brief notification sent before sunrise. Asterisk, I apologize, Mr. Blackwood. I won't be able to come to work today. Asterisk, nothing more. No reason. No promise about tomorrow. For anyone else inside the company, such an absence would have been insignificant. For Ethan, it was impossible. His beta secretary cautiously entered the office. Sir, should I ask Human Resources to contact Mr. Brooks? Damian lifted his eyes. Did anyone speak with him? She hesitated. No, sir. His phone appears to be switched off. A silence settled over the office. It lasted only a few seconds. Yet somehow it felt unusually heavy. Damian closed the tablet. Cancel me 10 o'clock. The secretary blinked. Sir, I'm going out. She looked genuinely confused. Damian Blackwood never visited employees personally. Problems came to him. People came to him. That was how the world had always worked. Yet something unfamiliar stirred beneath the perfect control he had cultivated for years. Not anxiety, not concern, curiosity, or perhaps something he had forgotten how to recognize. Less than 40 minutes later, his black sedan left the financial district behind. Glass skyscrapers gradually disappeared, replaced by aging apartment buildings whose faded walls carried decades of rain and neglect. Damian looked through the tinted window without saying a word. He had approved Ethan's salary personally. It was generous, more than generous. There was no logical reason his assistant should be living here. The driver finally slowed beside a narrow residential street. We've arrived, Mr. Blackwood. Damian stepped onto the cracked sidewalk. Children chased a worn soccer ball between rusted bicycles. An elderly woman watered dying flowers on a tiny balcony. Laundry fluttered from old windows above. Nothing about this neighborhood matched the composed, immaculate assistant who spent every day at Blackwood Holdings wearing pressed shirts and offering calm smiles. Damien climbed 3 flights of dimly lit stairs before stopping in front of apartment 3B. The hallway smelled faintly of medicine and old paint. He looked once at the apartment number, then raised his hand. 3 quiet knocks echoed through the thin wooden door. No answer. He waited. Another knock. Still nothing. Just as Damien reached for his phone, he heard it. A child's weak cough, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone struggling to breathe. The cough came again, longer this time, followed by the strained wheeze of someone desperately trying to catch a breath that refused to come. Damien's hand froze inches from the doorknob. The hallway fell silent once more, but the silence felt painfully alive, interrupted only by the faint hum of an aging oxygen concentrator somewhere inside the apartment. His instincts sharpened. Years of surviving the brutal politics of the underworld had taught him to recognize suffering before anyone dared to speak about it. Pain had its own rhythm. Desperation carried its own scent. This apartment smelled of both. He knocked again, louder this time. Ethan. No response. Only hurried footsteps approached the door before stopping abruptly, as though whoever stood on the other side was struggling to decide whether opening it would create an even greater disaster. Several long seconds passed. Finally, the old lock clicked. The door opened only a few inches. Damien had almost forgotten what Ethan looked like outside the immaculate world of Blackwood Holdings. The young Omega's neatly styled chestnut hair had become a tangled mess. Dark circles framed his usually bright blue eyes, and his pale face looked almost translucent beneath the dim apartment light. He still wore yesterday's wrinkled white dress shirt, sleeves rolled unevenly to his elbows, as if he had never even found time to change. For the first time in 5 years, Damien saw exhaustion instead of composure. Mr. Blackwood. The surprise in Ethan's trembling voice was genuine. You shouldn't be here. Damien studied him carefully. I could say the same. Ethan instinctively shifted his body, trying to block the narrow opening. It was a subtle movement, almost invisible, but Damien noticed everything. His assistant was hiding something. I apologize for missing work. His voice remained polite despite the obvious fatigue. I'll return tomorrow. You turned your phone off. I am sorry. No explanation. A brief silence followed. Ethan lowered his eyes. There were family matters. The answer sounded rehearsed. Too simple. Too carefully chosen. Damien had listened to countless liars throughout his life. Some lied to survive. Others lied to gain power. Ethan's lie felt different. It sounded like someone trying to protect everyone except himself. Before Damien could respond, another cough echoed from deeper inside the apartment. This one belonged to a child. A tiny, painful cough that seemed much too weak for someone so young. Ethan's expression changed instantly. Fear replaced professionalism. He turned around without thinking. I'll be right there. The words escaped naturally, spoken not to Damien, but to whoever waited inside. Then he remembered his employer was still standing outside the door. Embarrassment flashed across his face. I'm sorry. Damien's gaze remained fixed on him. Who is inside? No one you need to worry about. Another lie. This one came too quickly. A soft voice suddenly drifted from the living room. Ethan. It belonged to an elderly woman. Fragile, breathless, filled with quiet pain. I'm coming. Without waiting for permission, Damien gently pushed the door wider. Ethan's eyes widened. Sir, please. But the Mafia Alpha had already stepped inside. The apartment was impossibly small. A narrow living room connected directly to a tiny kitchen where several medicine bottles crowded the counter beside unopened bills. An oxygen concentrator hummed beside an old sofa. On that sofa rested a frail woman wrapped in blankets, an oxygen tube beneath her nose as she struggled through every breath. Near the window sat a little boy no older than 7, coloring quietly with broken crayons on the back of grocery receipts. Every few seconds he paused to cough into his sleeve before continuing to draw, as though he had learned not to complain. The walls carried patches of peeling paint. Rain stains spread across the ceiling. A single portable heater fought unsuccessfully against the winter cold. Everything looked painfully worn. Everything except one corner. There, carefully folded on a dining chair, hung Ethan's perfectly pressed business suit. The same suit he wore every morning at Blackwood Holdings. Damien stared at it for a long moment. Every day Ethan arrived, looking immaculate. Every day he smiled politely. Every day he solved impossible problems before anyone noticed they existed. And every evening he came home to this. The realization settled heavily inside Damien's chest. His generous salary suddenly meant nothing. Money could buy expensive watches, luxury cars, entire corporations. Yet somehow it had failed to erase the quiet suffering hidden inside the apartment of the man who worked closest to him. The little boy finally looked up. His large green eyes met Damien's silver ones with innocent curiosity. "Big brother," he whispered to Ethan. "Is he another doctor who came to help Grandma?" The innocent question struck the room with more force than any bullet Damien Blackwood had ever faced. The little boy's hopeful eyes lingered on Damien, waiting for an answer that no one seemed willing to give. Ethan's face lost what little color it had left. No, he said softly, forcing a smile that looked painfully fragile. "Mr. Blackwood is my employer." The child nodded politely before lowering his head again, returning to his drawing as though disappointment had become something he experienced too often to react to anymore. Damien's gaze remained fixed on the crumpled sheet of paper beneath the boy's small hands. It was a drawing of 3 people. An elderly woman sat in a wheelchair beneath a bright yellow sun. Beside her stood Ethan, smiling far more brightly than he ever smiled in real life. The third figure was a little boy holding Ethan's hand. There was no father, no mother, only the 3 of them. The picture carried more truth than words ever could. "I'm sorry our home is messy." Ethan quietly stepped forward, gathering scattered medicine boxes from the coffee table with practiced movements. "I wasn't expecting visitors." Damien looked around once more. Nothing here suggested laziness. Nothing suggested irresponsibility. The apartment was simply overwhelmed by survival. Prescription bottles lined the kitchen shelves where expensive spices should have been. Medical invoices were stacked beneath a chipped ceramic bowl. Several envelopes, stamped final notice, lay unopened beside the sink. Near the refrigerator stood an old calendar. Every square was filled with handwritten notes. Asterisk dialysis, respiratory therapy, school meeting, double shift, rent due, medication refill. Asterisk each day seemed scheduled around keeping someone else alive. Damien slowly walked closer. "Ethan." The Omega immediately stiffened. "Yes, sir." "How long?" Ethan frowned. "How long have you been living like this?" Silence settled between them. The oxygen machine continued its steady rhythm, filling the apartment with an almost mechanical heartbeat. Finally, Ethan exhaled. "My father died 4 years ago." His voice was calm, almost too calm. "He left behind debts he borrowed, trying to pay for my mother's treatment." Damien said nothing. "My younger brother." Ethan glanced toward Noah, making sure the child was distracted before continuing. "He has a chronic lung condition. He gets better, then worse again." He smiled faintly. "He's stronger than he looks." Noah coughed again. The smile disappeared. "My mother can't work anymore." Damien's eyes drifted toward the frail woman sleeping beneath several blankets. "So, I became the only income. You never mentioned any of this." Ethan laughed quietly. It wasn't amusement. It sounded more like surrender. "You hired me to solve your problems, Mr. Blackwood." His fingers tightened around a medicine bottle. "Not to become one." The words settled heavily inside Damien's chest. 4 or 5 years Ethan had worked beside him through impossible negotiations, overnight business trips, violent conflicts between rival syndicates, and endless corporate crises. Never once had he arrived asking for sympathy. Never once had he requested special treatment. Even when exhaustion shadowed his eyes, he simply worked harder. Damien suddenly remembered countless evenings when he had ordered Ethan to stay late preparing contracts. Business dinners that stretched past midnight. Emergency flights at dawn. Weekend meetings. Without complaint. Without excuse. Without revealing that every extra hour meant someone inside this apartment waited alone. Ethan. Yes. When did your mother begin using oxygen? About 18 months ago. And your brother? Since birth. You've been paying for all of this yourself. Ethan nodded. I sold my father's workshop first. Another nod. Then the family car. He forced another smile. I stopped eating lunch outside. His voice remained strangely light, as though discussing ordinary office expenses. I haven't bought new clothes in almost 3 years. Damien instinctively looked toward the carefully pressed business suit hanging by the window. Only now did he notice the nearly invisible stitching along one sleeve. The jacket had been repaired. Again and again. Every tiny stitch had been sewn by hand. Suddenly, every perfectly polished shoe, every neatly ironed shirt, every professional appearance Ethan presented at Blackwood Holdings became something entirely different. Not elegance. Sacrifice. The elderly woman stirred weakly on the sofa. Ethan, her trembling voice barely carried across the room. I'm sorry. Ethan crossed the room immediately and gently adjusted her oxygen tube. You don't need to apologize, Mom. Tears shimmered in her tired eyes. I've become such a burden. You raised me. He brushed several silver strands away from her face. Let me take care of you now. Damien stood motionless. In the underworld, loyalty was often bought with fear. Inside this tiny apartment, he was witnessing a loyalty that had been built entirely upon love. And somehow, that felt infinitely stronger. The silence inside the cathedral was shattered not by music, but by the sound of Damien Blackwood's footsteps echoing across the polished marble floor. Hundreds of guests turned toward the entrance. The rehearsal dinner had already begun. Crystal chandeliers bathed the grand hall in warm golden light, while politicians, executives, and influential members of the city's oldest families exchanged polite smiles over expensive champagne. No one noticed that Damien had arrived alone. Victoria Ashcroft did. She crossed the room immediately, her white rehearsal gown flowing behind her with effortless elegance. You're late, she said quietly, though the tension beneath her smile was impossible to miss. Everyone has been asking where you've been. Damien looked at her, but for the first time since their engagement, his thoughts were somewhere else entirely. He saw Ethan adjusting an oxygen mask with gentle hands. He heard Noah asking whether another doctor had finally come to save his grandmother. He remembered the carefully stitched sleeve on Ethan's jacket. I had something important to do, Damien answered. Victoria studied him carefully. You've never missed a rehearsal meeting. No, but today you did. He offered no explanation. Around them, conversations resumed, yet an uneasy feeling lingered in the air. Damien's father approached with several board members from both families. There you are, the older Alpha said. The lawyers have finalized the merger documents. After the wedding tomorrow, both organizations will officially operate as one. Merger, partnership, expansion. Every word sounded exactly as it always had. Calculated, profitable, necessary. Yet none of them felt important anymore. Damien accepted the folder handed to him. As he opened it, a single invoice slipped from between the pages. Not one of the legal documents. A hospital bill. His eyes narrowed. He recognized it instantly. It belonged to Ethan. He must have picked it up accidentally while helping gather the scattered papers in the apartment. Asterisk total due. $48,000. Past due. Final collection notice. Asterisk Damien stared at the amount for several long seconds. $48,000. Less than the cost of the champagne currently being served to the guests. Less than the floral arrangements decorating the cathedral. Less than the watch resting on the wrist of one executive standing only a few feet away. For the people in this room, it was almost meaningless. For Ethan, it was an impossible mountain. Damien, Victoria's voice pulled him back. Are you listening? He folded the invoice quietly and slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket. I am. But he wasn't. The officiant called everyone toward the altar to begin the rehearsal. As Damien took his place, Victoria stepped beside him exactly as planned. The photographer began demonstrating where they would stand during the ceremony. Look at each other. They did. Victoria smiled flawlessly. Damien realized he felt absolutely nothing. No excitement. No anticipation. Not even nervousness. Only emptiness. Then, without warning, his phone vibrated. A private number. Almost no one possessed it. He answered immediately. Mr. Blackwood. It was Ethan. His voice sounded unusually strained. I'm sorry to bother you outside business hours. Damien stepped away from the altar. What happened? A long silence answered him. Finally, Ethan spoke again. My mother collapsed. The words were calm. Too calm. The ambulance is taking her to St. Gabriel Medical Center. Another pause. I just wanted to let you know I won't be available tomorrow. The rehearsal music continued behind Damien. Guests applauded politely as if nothing in the world had changed. Damien looked toward the altar where everyone expected him to stand. Then he looked toward the cathedral doors. His decision came with astonishing clarity. I'll be there, he said. Ethan sounded confused. Sir, you're not going through this alone. Without waiting for a reply, Damien ended the call. Across the hall, dozens of surprised eyes followed him as he removed the boutonniere from his lapel and placed it carefully on a nearby table. For the first time in years, Damien Blackwood walked away from power without looking back. And every step carried him farther from the wedding everyone expected and closer to the life he had never imagined choosing. The rain had already begun by the time Damien Blackwood's car reached St. Gabriel Medical Center. Water streaked across the windshield in restless silver lines, blurring the city lights into a sea of pale colors. The driver hurried toward the emergency entrance to open the umbrella, but Damien had already stepped into the storm. Cold rain soaked the shoulders of his tailored coat within seconds. He didn't slow down. The emergency department smelled of antiseptic, exhaustion, and quiet fear. Nurses moved quickly between curtained rooms. Monitors chimed in uneven rhythms. Somewhere down the corridor, a child cried before being gently comforted by a tired mother. It was a world completely removed from marble boardrooms and billion-dollar negotiations. Damien spotted Ethan immediately. The young Omega sat alone outside the intensive care unit, elbows resting on his knees, both hands tightly clasped together as though he were trying to hold himself together by force alone. His neatly pressed image was gone. His shirt was wrinkled. His sleeves were stained with rainwater. There was dried blood near one cuff, probably from helping the paramedics. For the first time since Damien had known him, Ethan looked his age, 26, not the flawless assistant who anticipated every problem before it appeared. Just a son waiting outside a hospital room, hoping his mother would survive another night. Ethan looked up when footsteps stopped before him. His tired blue eyes widened. Mr. Blackwood, you came. Damien simply took the empty seat beside him. I said I would. Neither of them spoke again for several moments. The silence felt strangely comfortable. Not awkward, not forced, just two exhausted people listening to the rain strike the hospital windows. Eventually, Ethan lowered his head. I am sorry. Damien frowned slightly. For what? For making you leave your rehearsal. You didn't. I called. You informed me. Another silence. Then Ethan gave a weak smile. You always know how to win arguments. Damien almost smiled. Almost. A doctor finally stepped through the ICU doors. Family of Mrs. Brooks? Ethan stood so quickly the chair nearly tipped over. I'm her son. The doctor removed his glasses with visible fatigue. She's stable for now. Ethan closed his eyes. The breath he released sounded almost painful. But the single word froze the hallway. Her lungs are deteriorating faster than before. We'll need a more aggressive treatment plan. It won't be inexpensive. Ethan nodded before the doctor even finished. I understand. No. The doctor looked directly at him. I don't think you do. He handed Ethan several documents. Estimated costs, medication approvals, emergency procedures, long-term respiratory support. Each page represented another impossible decision, another mountain built from numbers. Ethan stared at the papers without turning a single page. His hands were trembling, only slightly. But Damien noticed. He always noticed. The doctor offered an apologetic nod before returning inside. The hallway became quiet once again. Ethan remained standing. He looked at the paperwork, then at the closed ICU doors. Finally, his shoulders dropped. Just a little. Yet it was enough. 5 years of perfect professionalism cracked in complete silence. I don't know what else to sell. The words were barely louder than a whisper. They weren't directed at Damien. Perhaps they weren't directed at anyone. My father's workshop is gone. The car is gone. The apartment is already mortgaged. I've borrowed from everyone who would still answer my calls. His voice never rose. That somehow made every sentence hurt more. I kept thinking, if I worked harder, if I accepted more overtime, if I slept less, it would eventually be enough. He laughed once, softly, without joy. But every time I catch up, another bill arrives. Damien looked at him quietly. Throughout his life, countless people had cried in front of him. Some begged, some negotiated, some threatened. Ethan did none of those things. He simply stood there, carrying a weight no one should have carried alone. Then something unexpected happened. A small pair of arms wrapped around Ethan's waist. Noah. The little boy had apparently slipped away from the pediatric observation room. His breathing remained shallow. His cheeks were pale, but he smiled anyway. It's okay, big brother. We still have each other. Ethan immediately knelt. He hugged Noah carefully, mindful of the oxygen tube resting beneath the child's nose. I'm sorry. You shouldn't have to worry about grown-up problems. Noah shook his head. I'm almost 8. I'm helping. Damien looked away for a brief moment. He suddenly remembered the boardroom waiting for him, the wedding planner, the cathedral, the executives discussing the upcoming celebration over imported champagne. None of it seemed real anymore. His phone vibrated. Victoria. He watched the screen. It rang once, twice, 3 times. He pressed decline. Another call arrived immediately, this time from his father. He silenced it without looking. When he lifted his eyes again, Noah was watching him. The little boy hesitated before speaking. Mister, are you Big Brother's boss? I am. Then, Noah lowered his voice. Please don't make him work so much anymore. He always comes home when it's dark. Sometimes he falls asleep at the table before eating. I think he's very tired. No accusation. No anger. Just innocent honesty. Damien felt those simple words strike harder than any challenge he had ever faced. He looked at Ethan. The Omegas seemed embarrassed. I'm sorry. He doesn't know what he's saying. No. Damien answered quietly. I think he knows exactly what he's saying. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside the hospital corridor, Damien Blackwood made no announcement. He signed no contract. He offered no grand promise. Instead, he stood and walked toward the reception desk. When he returned several minutes later, nothing about his expression had changed. Only one thing was different. Every outstanding payment under the Brooks family account had disappeared from the hospital system. No one saw the transfer. No one heard his instructions. Not Ethan. Not Noah. Not even the billing staff, who had been ordered to record the payment as coming from an anonymous charitable medical trust. Damien intended to leave it that way, because gratitude was never what he wanted. He only wanted one thing, for the young Omega who had quietly carried everyone else's burdens, to have one peaceful night. As midnight settled over the city, Ethan finally drifted into an exhausted sleep beside Noah's hospital bed. Damien remained awake in the chair by the window, watching over both of them for reasons he still couldn't explain. And far across the city, inside the Blackwood estate, the lights in the wedding hall remained on. No one had yet realized. The groom had chosen a hospital corridor over his own future. Morning arrived without bringing anyone peace. The first rays of sunlight spread across the windows of St. Gabriel Medical Center, painting the quiet hallway in a pale golden glow. Nurses changed shifts with tired smiles while the smell of fresh coffee drifted through the corridor. Damien Blackwood had not left. He was still sitting outside the intensive care unit, exactly where Ethan had fallen asleep several hours earlier. His charcoal suit was no longer perfectly pressed. His tie had been loosened. Dark circles rested beneath his silver eyes. For the first time in years, The most powerful alpha in the city looked like someone who had simply spent the night worrying about another human being. The sound of footsteps approached. Ethan slowly opened his eyes. For a brief second, he looked confused. Then he remembered where he was. He immediately stood. "You stayed here all night." Damien answered calmly. "So did you. That's different." "Why?" "I'm family." Damien looked toward the ICU doors before answering. "You've been my family in everything except blood for 5 years." The words escaped naturally. Neither of them expected them. Ethan lowered his eyes. He did not know how to respond. Before the silence could grow heavier, the attending physician returned. He carried a small folder. "The medication has begun working." Ethan released a breath he did not realize he had been holding. "But recovery will take time." "We also discovered another concern." The doctor paused before continuing. "Your brother's lungs have become more fragile than the previous examination suggested. We recommend transferring him to a specialist." Ethan closed his eyes. Another problem. Another expense. Another impossible decision. "I understand." The doctor studied him for a moment. "You don't need to worry about the financial approval. It has already been completed." Ethan looked up. "I'm sorry. I think you've mistaken another patient." The doctor checked the file. "No, the Brooks family account has been fully guaranteed." Ethan stared at the paperwork. "There must be some mistake." "There isn't." The authorization was signed shortly after midnight. The doctor offered a polite smile before walking away. Ethan remained frozen. He slowly turned toward Damien. "You knew about this." Damien met his gaze without hesitation. "I knew your family needed treatment. You paid for it. I made sure no one delayed your mother's care." "You shouldn't have." I disagreed. Ethan took one slow breath. "I can't accept something this expensive." "You already have. I'll repay every cent." "I know." The answer surprised Ethan. "You know?" Damien nodded. "You'll repay it by continuing to be the person you've always been." Ethan almost laughed. Instead, his eyes became red. No one had ever trusted him that completely. Before he could answer, Damien's phone began ringing again. This time he answered. His father's voice echoed through the receiver with controlled anger. "Where are you?" "At the hospital. The wedding ceremony begins in 4 hours." "I know. The Ashcroft family is already here." Damien remained silent. His father continued. "Come back immediately." "No." The single word brought complete silence to the other end. "What did you say?" "I said no. You are throwing away everything this family has built." Damien looked through the glass window into the intensive care room. He watched Ethan's mother sleeping peacefully for the first time since arriving. Then he answered, "If everything we've built requires abandoning people who need us most, perhaps it deserves to be questioned." His father inhaled sharply. "You are speaking like a fool." "No. For the first time in a long while, I think I'm speaking honestly." The call ended. Damien slipped the phone back into his pocket. Across the hallway, Ethan had heard enough to understand what had happened. "You shouldn't ruin your future because of me." Damien looked at him quietly. "My future?" He considered those words for several seconds. "I spent years believing my future had already been decided." He looked toward the city beyond the hospital windows. "I've only just realized it never belonged to anyone else." Far across the city, the grand cathedral stood filled with guests. Crystal chandeliers illuminated rows of white flowers. Musicians waited. Photographers checked their cameras again and again. Every seat had been occupied. Every clock continued moving. Only the groom never arrived. Victoria Ashcroft stood alone inside the bridal preparation room. She looked at the untouched wedding bouquet resting on the table. A strange feeling settled inside her heart. It was not anger. Not yet. It was certainty. Somewhere beyond the walls of the cathedral, something had happened that was more important than the life they had planned together. And deep inside, she already knew. When Damien finally returned, he would not be the same man who had walked away yesterday. The news spread through Blackwood Holdings before noon. No official announcement had been made. No statement had been released. Yet everyone inside the headquarters understood something extraordinary had happened. The wedding of Damien Blackwood had not begun. His office remained empty. His private driver had not returned. The chairman had canceled every meeting without providing an explanation. Rumors multiplied with every passing hour. Some believed Damien had discovered a betrayal within the Ashcroft family. Others whispered that a rival syndicate had launched an attack. No one imagined the truth. The man who ruled half the city was sitting in a hospital cafeteria with a paper cup of coffee that had already gone cold. Across the small table, Noah slowly ate a bowl of soup. Every few bites, the little boy looked up at Damien as though making sure he had not disappeared. "You don't have to stay." Ethan placed another spoon beside Noah. "You've already done more than enough." Damien looked at the child. "Has he finished his medication?" Ethan nodded. "He'll need another dose this evening." "I'll remind you." Ethan smiled faintly. "You've never needed reminders." "I know, but perhaps you do." The words settled gently between them. For years, Ethan had remembered every schedule in Damien's life. Every meeting, every flight, every birthday of every important client, every deadline. No one had ever remembered his. His phone vibrated quietly. The screen displayed dozens of unread messages. Board members, lawyers, executives, Victoria, his father. He ignored every one of them. Instead, he looked at Ethan. "When was the last time you had breakfast?" Ethan hesitated. "I don't remember." "I thought so." Damien pushed the untouched sandwich across the table. "Eat." "I'm not hungry." "No, you've forgotten what hunger feels like." Ethan looked at the food without moving. Old habits were difficult to escape. Every dollar saved meant another prescription. Every skipped meal meant another chance for Noah to receive better treatment. Damien seemed to understand exactly what he was thinking. This isn't charity. It's an order. For the first time in years, Ethan laughed. A real laugh. Quiet. Short. But genuine. "You really are impossible." "So I've been told." Noah looked between them with growing curiosity. "Big brother." When you smile like that, you look younger." Ethan reached over and gently ruffled Noah's hair. "I'll take that as a compliment." A nurse hurried into the cafeteria. "Mr. Brooks." Ethan stood immediately. "Is my mother awake?" "Yes. She's asking for you." He turned toward Damien. "I won't be long. I'll stay with Noah." Ethan disappeared down the hallway. The little boy quietly swung his legs beneath the chair. Several moments passed before he spoke again. "Mr. Damien." "Yes." "Can I ask you something?" "You just did." Noah giggled. Then his expression became serious. "Are you lonely?" The unexpected question caught Damien completely off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "My brother smiles differently when you're here. He smiles like he isn't lonely." The child lowered his eyes. "I think you smile like someone who forgot how." Damien did not answer immediately. He had negotiated with presidents. He had outmaneuvered rival syndicates. He had survived assassination attempts. Yet a 7-year-old boy had asked the one question no adult ever dared to ask. Was he lonely? He looked through the cafeteria window. The city stretched endlessly beneath a gray afternoon sky. He owned buildings, companies, influence, power. But there had never been anyone waiting for him to come home. Perhaps Noah had seen the truth before he had. Several floors above them, Ethan quietly entered the intensive care room. His mother's breathing had become steadier. The oxygen mask still covered her face, but her eyes slowly opened. "Ethan, I'm here." She reached weakly for his hand. "I dreamed." She paused to catch her breath. "I dreamed someone came to save us." Ethan forced a gentle smile. "It was only a dream." She looked into his eyes for a long moment. Then she whispered softly, "No, I think he's already here." Before Ethan could ask what she meant, she drifted back to sleep. He remained beside the bed in thoughtful silence. When he finally returned downstairs, he stopped in the hallway. 2 men in dark suits were standing near the hospital entrance. They were not doctors. They were not visitors. Their posture was too disciplined. Their eyes scanned every passing face. The moment they noticed Ethan, one of them quietly spoke into an earpiece. Neither man approached. Neither man smiled. They simply watched. A cold uneasiness settled deep inside Ethan's chest. Without realizing it, he turned toward the cafeteria, toward Damien. For the first time since all of this had begun, he felt that someone else might already know exactly where they were. Damien noticed them the moment he stepped into the hallway. The two men remained near the entrance, pretending to study the visitor information board. Neither wore a hospital badge. Neither carried flowers or personal belongings. They watched people instead of rooms. One habit, one purpose, observation. Damien slowed his pace without changing his expression. Years of navigating dangerous alliances had taught him one lesson. The people who looked the calmest were often the most dangerous. Ethan followed his gaze. Do you know them? No, but they aren't here for treatment. The taller man adjusted the sleeve of his coat. A tiny movement, almost invisible. A hidden microphone rested beneath the fabric. Damien recognized the outline immediately. His voice remained low. Take Noah upstairs. Ethan frowned. What happened? I'll explain later. They're watching us. Aren't they? They're watching you. Those words drained the color from Ethan's face. I don't understand. I don't think they want you to. Noah looked between both adults. Big brother. Ethan forced a smile. We're going back to Mom's room. Okay. The little boy slipped his small hand into Ethan's without asking another question. As they disappeared into the elevator, Damien remained exactly where he was. The two strangers finally moved. Not toward Ethan, toward Damien. The older of the pair stopped several feet away. Mr. Blackwood, you know who I am? We know many things. Damien studied the man's face. Mid-40s, military posture, scar beneath the jawline. No visible weapon. That meant the weapon was hidden. What do you want? We're only here to deliver a message. I'm listening. The Omega is involved in matters that don't concern him. Damien's expression remained unreadable. Which Omega? The man almost smiled. You know exactly which one. A brief silence settled between them. Then the stranger continued. Tell him to stop looking into old family records. Damien's eyes narrowed. Ethan has done no such thing. Perhaps. Or perhaps someone believes he already knows too much. The stranger reached into his coat. Damien's body shifted almost imperceptibly, ready, prepared. Instead of a weapon, the man removed a plain white envelope. He placed it on a nearby chair. No threats. No violence. Not today. We simply suggest that Mr. Brooks leaves the city. And if he doesn't, the man's eyes became cold. Then the people he loves will continue finding themselves inside hospitals. Without another word, both men walked away. They entered a black sedan waiting outside the entrance. Within seconds, the vehicle disappeared into traffic. Damien picked up the envelope. Inside was a single photograph. The image had clearly been taken years earlier. A much younger Ethan stood outside a modest woodworking shop beside his father. Both of them were smiling. Across the bottom of the photograph, someone had written 6 words. He was never supposed to survive. Damien folded the photograph carefully. Nothing about this was random. Someone had been watching. Ethan long before he ever joined Blackwood Holdings. Someone knew his family. Someone wanted him afraid. Upstairs, Ethan adjusted his mother's blanket while Noah quietly colored another picture. The little boy looked up. Big brother, can Mr. Damien stay for dinner? Ethan smiled sadly. He has a very important life. So, he probably has somewhere else to be. At that exact moment, the room door opened. Damien stepped inside. He looked directly at Ethan. I don't. Ethan searched his face. Something had changed. The quiet composure was still there, but beneath it rested a determination he had never seen before. What happened downstairs? Damien closed the door behind him. I think someone has mistaken you for an easy target. And they've made the same mistake many others made before. He slipped the photograph back into his pocket. I intend to prove them wrong. Outside the hospital, another black vehicle remained parked across the street. Its engine continued running. From behind the tinted window, a pair of unseen eyes watched the room on the 3rd floor. A calm voice broke the silence inside the car. So, the Alpha has chosen the Omega. Another voice answered quietly. Good. That makes the next move much easier. The black sedan remained across the street long after sunset. Its headlights stayed off. Its engine barely made a sound. Inside, the two men watched the hospital without speaking. Every entrance, every elevator, every security guard. Nothing escaped their attention. On the 3rd floor, Damien stood beside the window. He had already noticed the vehicle. They're still here. Ethan followed his gaze. Should we call the police? Damien shook his head. They haven't broken any laws. Not yet. Then what do? We stop reacting. Ethan looked at him in confusion. I don't understand. If they want you frightened, we don't give them fear. If they want you to run, we don't move. And if they attack, Damien met his eyes. They'll have to come through me first. The certainty in his voice silenced every doubt inside the room. Noah quietly looked up from his coloring book. Mr. Damien, are you a superhero? A faint smile appeared on Damien's face. I don't think so, but heroes protect people. The little boy pointed at Ethan. You've been protecting my brother all day. Damien glanced toward Ethan. I simply don't like seeing good people carry everything alone. Ethan lowered his eyes. No one had ever described him that way before. A gentle knock interrupted the moment. The attending physician entered with a tablet in his hand. I have good news. Everyone looked toward him. Mrs. Brooks responded better than expected. Her breathing has stabilized. If everything continues like this, she'll be transferred out of intensive care tomorrow. Relief swept through Ethan so suddenly that he had to steady himself against the bedside table. Thank you. The doctor smiled. You should thank whoever made sure treatment started without delay. He left before Ethan could answer. The room became quiet once more. Ethan slowly turned toward Damien. You knew this would happen. I hope. You gave my mother a chance. I removed an obstacle. You changed everything. Damien looked toward the hospital corridor. No, she did. He nodded toward Ethan's mother. She chose to keep fighting. Several minutes later, Ethan stepped outside to buy fresh clothes for Noah. Damien stayed behind. He sat beside the hospital bed while the little boy continued drawing. After a while, Noah slid the paper across the blanket. This one's for you. Damien picked it up. 3 figures stood beneath a bright blue sky. Noah, Ethan, and Damien. This time there was a 4th figure, an older woman standing beside them. Above their heads, the child had written one uneven sentence. Our family. Damien stared at the drawing longer than he intended. He had signed mergers worth billions. He had inherited an empire. Yet no document had ever carried as much weight as a child's crayon drawing. Across the city, inside Blackwood Manor, the atmosphere was far less peaceful. Damien's father stood at the head of the conference table. Victoria Ashcroft sat opposite him. Neither had touched the tea placed before them. The ceremony has become a public embarrassment. Victoria spoke calmly. I'm not concerned about public opinion. The older Alpha looked at her. Then what concerns you? She answered without hesitation. I've known Damien for 7 years. He has never abandoned responsibility. If he walked away, then something changed him. The chairman's expression hardened. No, someone changed him. A silence settled over the room. One of the senior advisors stepped forward carrying a thin folder. We investigated Mr. Ethan Brooks. Victoria looked up immediately. What did you find? Almost nothing. What does that mean? It means someone erased parts of his past. The advisor opened the folder. Employment records are complete. School records exist. But everything connected to the years before his father's death has gaps. Entire archives disappeared. Medical files are missing. Even government records contain unexplained revisions. Victoria Froneth. Who would have enough influence to erase someone's history? No one answered because everyone in the room was thinking the same thing. Only someone with extraordinary power could make a person almost disappear without leaving a trace. Back at the hospital, Damien's phone vibrated once. A message arrived from an unknown number. There were only 2 sentences. Asterisk, you have 24 hours. After that, the Omega belongs to us. Asterisk. Damien read the message once, then deleted it. His expression never changed. But deep inside, one decision became absolute. Whatever secret surrounded Ethan's past, he would uncover it before anyone else did, even if it meant starting a war no one had seen coming. Damien did not sleep that night. The city outside his penthouse remained awake with him. Traffic flowed beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows. Helicopters crossed the skyline. Somewhere in the distance, another business deal was being signed. For years, this view had reminded him of everything he controlled. Tonight, it reminded him of everything he had failed to see. His phone rang shortly after dawn. Mr. Blackwood. It was Marcus, the head of internal security. Our investigation is complete. Damien remained silent. We found no evidence that Mr. Brooks has ever been involved in criminal activity. I expected that, but we did discover something unusual. Marcus placed a digital file onto Damien's tablet. Every promotion Ethan received was earned. Every performance review was exceptional. Every executive requested him personally. Damien slowly scrolled through the records. Perfect attendance. Outstanding evaluations. Commendations from departments across the company. Then one page caught his attention. Asterisk Employee Assistance Program. Status. Application never submitted. Asterisk Damien frowned. He qualified. Yes. Why didn't he receive it? Marcus hesitated. Because someone canceled the application before it reached Human Resources. The block has been active ever since he joined 5 years ago, tied to an overriding protocol. Damien's expression hardened. Ooh, we're still tracing the final authorization. A dangerous silence settled over the office. Someone inside Blackwood Holdings had deliberately prevented Ethan from receiving medical assistance. Not once. Repeatedly. Find them. Today. Yes, sir. Damien ended the call. For the first time, his concern was no longer limited to protecting Ethan from enemies outside the company. Someone inside his own organization had been quietly working against him. Hours later, St. Gabriel Medical Center felt brighter than it had in days. Ethan's mother had finally been transferred out of intensive care. Her breathing remained fragile, but the worst had passed. Noah stood beside the hospital bed, holding another drawing. I made this for you, Grandma. She smiled weakly. It's beautiful. It has all of us. She looked carefully at the picture. There was Ethan, Noah, and herself. Then she noticed the tall man standing beside them. She lifted her eyes toward Damien. So, you're the one my son never stops talking about. Ethan almost dropped the cup of water he was holding. Mom, I've barely mentioned him. She smiled knowingly. You don't need many words. A mother notices. Color rose into Ethan's cheeks. Damien remained unusually quiet. It was the first time in years that someone had looked at him without seeing a billionaire, a mafia alpha, or the head of an empire. She simply saw the man standing beside her son. A nurse entered the room carrying several discharge forms. Mr. Brooks, we'll need a family member to complete these. I'll do it. Ethan accepted the clipboard. As he stepped into the hallway, Damien followed. They stopped beside a large window overlooking the hospital garden. Neither spoke immediately. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. I've been thinking. Damien waited. When my mother is stronger, I should resign. The words hung heavily between them. You become the center of too much attention. I don't want my problems damaging your company. Damien looked at him steadily. You think leaving will solve this? It will remove me from your life. No, it won't. Ethan looked surprised. I've already tried imagining this company without you. It doesn't work. You spent 5 years making impossible days manageable. You've earned your place. I'm not talking about my job. I am. Damien's voice remained calm. But not only your job. For a brief moment, neither of them looked away. The corridor around them seemed to disappear. Only the sound of distant footsteps remained. Then Damien quietly continued. I don't want you to disappear because someone else decided you should. Ethan felt his heartbeat quicken. He wanted to answer. Instead, another voice interrupted them. Mr. Blackwood. Both men turned. Marcus had arrived at the hospital. His expression was more serious than Damien had ever seen. I found the override authorization. And it wasn't signed by a board member. It wasn't Human Resources. It came directly from someone inside the Blackwood family office. Damien's eyes narrowed. Marcus handed him a sealed envelope. There was another instruction attached. Damien opened it. Inside was a single sentence. Asterisk keep the assistant alive. Poor people make loyal servants. Asterisk the paper crumpled slowly in Damien's hand. Something cold settled behind his silver eyes. Marcus recognized that expression immediately. It was the same look Damien wore before every major war his organization had ever fought. Only this time, the battle was no longer about power. It had become personal. Damien did not say another word until Marcus left the hospital. The envelope remained in his hand, its edges wrinkled from the force of his grip. Ethan watched him carefully. "I've never seen you this angry." Damien slowly unfolded the paper once more. This wasn't written by an ordinary enemy. It came from someone who believed they had the right to decide another person's value. Ethan remained silent. He had heard similar words his entire life. Useful, replaceable, affordable, never important. Damien looked at him. "Did anyone at the company ever treat you differently?" Ethan hesitated. "A few people. Names. I don't want anyone punished because of me. This isn't because of you. It's because they abused the company I built." Before Ethan could answer, Marcus returned from the lobby after making a quick call. "I've confirmed the broader network. The hostile instruction regarding the family lineage itself originated 8 years ago." Damien frowned. 8 years. Yes, long before Ethan joined Blackwood Holdings. Marcus placed another file on the table. "The initial deep surveillance order wasn't created to target your assistant specifically. It was created to monitor anyone carrying the Brooks name." Ethan's breathing became uneven. "My family," Marcus nodded. "We believe your father discovered something shortly before he died." The hallway became completely still. "My father was only a carpenter." So everyone believed. Marcus opened another photograph. It showed Ethan's father standing inside his workshop. Behind him was a wooden cabinet. Nothing unusual, except for one detail. Hidden in the reflection of a dusty window stood 2 men wearing dark coats, watching, waiting. They were following him for months. Ethan stared at the picture. "I never noticed." "You weren't supposed to." A cold realization settled over him. His father's debts, the sudden illness, the constant pressure, the mysterious phone calls his father always refused to explain. Had none of it been an accident? His thoughts were interrupted by Noah running toward them. "Big brother, the doctor said Grandma can go home tomorrow." The child smiled brightly. "Can we finally eat dinner together again?" Ethan knelt and hugged him. "Yes, we'll go home together." Damien watched the 2 brothers in silence. Home. Such a simple word. Yet someone had spent years making sure this family never found peace. His phone vibrated. Another unknown number. This time there was only an address, and below were 6 words. "Come alone if you want answers." Damien looked at the message for several seconds before locking the screen. Ethan noticed. "What is it?" "Nothing you need to worry about. You've told me that before, and you didn't believe me then either." A faint smile appeared between them. Small, tired but real. Ethan looked directly into Damien's eyes. "If you're walking into danger, don't leave me behind." Damien held his gaze. "For 5 years you stood beside me through every crisis. I won't ask you to stand behind me now." Outside the hospital, the evening sky darkened beneath gathering clouds. Across the street, the black sedan was gone, but another vehicle had taken its place. Someone else was watching now, someone more patient, someone who had waited 8 years for this moment. Inside that car, a gloved hand closed an old file. Across the cover, one faded name could still be read. Asterisk Brooks Project. Status, reactivated. Asterisk the address led to an abandoned shipyard at the edge of the harbor. Fog drifted across rows of rusting containers. Broken cranes stretched into the night like silent giants frozen in time. Damien arrived alone. At least, that was what anyone watching would believe. Several members of Blackwood security were already positioned beyond the perimeter, hidden among empty warehouses. No headlights, no radios, only silence. Damien stepped onto the cracked concrete. His footsteps echoed through the darkness. "You asked for answers. I'm here." For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a slow clap broke the silence. A man emerged from the shadows. His hair had turned silver with age. His suit was immaculate despite the abandoned surroundings. He smiled as though greeting an old acquaintance. "Damien Blackwood, I wondered how long it would take before you chose the Omega over your empire." "You know Ethan." "I know of him." "That's not the same answer." The older man nodded slightly. "Fair enough. I knew his father." Damien's expression did not change. "What did he discover?" "Something that was never meant to leave Blackwood archives. Your father remembers it, but he pretends he doesn't." Damien took one slow step forward. My father has never mentioned Ethan's family. Of course not, because if he admitted the truth, he would also admit who destroyed them. Those words settled like ice between them. You expect me to believe that. I expect you to investigate. The stranger reached into his coat. Damien instinctively shifted his weight. Instead of a weapon, the man produced a small brass key and tossed it across the concrete. It landed at Damien's feet. Warehouse 31. Open the final locker. You'll understand why Ethan has been hunted for 8 years and why your family was ordered to keep him alive. Damien picked up the key. What do you gain from telling me this? The older man looked toward the dark sea. I'm tired. Tired of watching powerful men bury innocent people beneath their secrets. Before Damien could ask another question, headlights suddenly flooded the dock. 3 black SUVs raced toward the warehouse. The stranger's expression changed for the first time. So they found us. Gunfire shattered the night. Concrete exploded beside Damien. The stranger shoved him behind a steel container. Go. If they take the key, Ethan dies without ever learning who he really is. More shots echoed through the harbor. By the time Damien reached his car, the stranger had disappeared. No body, no footprints, only blood staining the rain-soaked pavement. Back at the hospital, Ethan woke suddenly. His heart was pounding. The room was quiet. Noah was asleep. His mother rested peacefully. Yet something felt wrong. His phone vibrated. One new message with no sender number, only a photograph. It showed Damien standing at the abandoned shipyard only minutes earlier. Across the image, a single sentence had been written. You are the reason he will lose everything. Ethan stared at the screen, his hands beginning to shake. Far across the city, Damien tightened his grip around the brass key resting in his pocket. For the first time in his life, he was no longer searching for a business rival. He was searching for the truth. And somewhere beneath the city, inside Warehouse 31, a locked steel cabinet had remained unopened for 8 years. Inside it waited a file that would change everything either of them believed about Ethan Brooks. The puzzle was finally complete. The trap was officially set. And for Damien Blackwood, the war to protect his Omega had just begun.